Well, this is fun. This week on DadAwesome, I have the privilege of chatting in all the way over in White Plains, New York, with my new friend, Pastor Wayne Francis. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Jeff. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm grateful. You know, our mutual friend, Pastor Nate Piccini, he's like, you guys got to connect. Wayne is a passionate dad. And I've heard you, I didn't tell you this, but I've heard you preach before. So I was in Birmingham, Alabama, heard you preach. And I'll tell you this, the level of joy and passion that you lead with, it was infectious. Our entire team talked, I think we were at the swimming pool later after that conference, and we were just talking about like the joy and just like, so anyways, thank you for not holding anything back when you preach God's word. I love that.
So cool. Thank you.
Yeah, but today we're talking about fatherhood, and I know this is an area of passion for you as well. But can you help introduce your family to us? Introduce your girls and your wife, and then also talk a little bit about your leadership and where you're serving in ministry.
Yeah, I've been married to Claudene Francis, who I call Classy. Nobody calls her Claudene. But when we were dating some 21 years ago, I'd just always be, I'd say, hey, Classy girl, how you doing? You got to have your game right. But nevertheless, the nickname is stuck with her because she's beautiful and statuesque and intelligent, that even her parents call her Classy now. Nobody calls her Claudene, but that's that. Been married for 20 years. We have two girls. One is 16, her name is Haleigh, and then my 14-year-old, her name is Ryleigh, and they love to dance on TikTok and drive me crazy. No, they're actually really good girls, but we're doing good. We started this church about 10 years ago. It was originally Authentic Church when we planted it, and then we came under the auspices of my pastor's ministry, John and Leslie Siebling in Tennessee. So now I am the lead pastor of Life Church New York. So let's go. And that's the new.
Oh, I love that you guys are now, I mean, you've been partnering over the years, but officially the same church now. And yeah, we just love at Substance Church learning from you guys and the way God has led your ministry. And it's fun. Is this true? You are preaching with your daughters this Sunday, Father's Day Sunday. Is that right?
Yes. We're doing this Father's Day event called Plants and Pillars, inspired by Psalm 144 and verse 12, where David has this wartime vision. He says, God's going to bring victory and make our sons be like well-nurtured plants and our daughters like pillars. And we talk about how to raise sons that are well-nurtured plants, and we talk about daughters that are pillars. So it's going to be
cool. Let's go. And it's fun. This is fun for me because this will release this conversation after Father's Day. So I'll be the link right into watching that message. So I want to encourage right now, anyone listening, go listen to that message. That's going to be incredible. Now, Wayne, tell me, when you think fatherhood, when you're just having a conversation, big picture to start with, I have young girls, 1, 3, and 6 years old. You got teenage daughters. Where would you find yourself talking to, in this case, just me, as far as some wisdom, some perspective, where would you say you find yourself coaching me when I'm like, give me some dad advice?
I would say that the best thing about kids is that they're not just called out. Great daughters, great sons are not called out. They're carved out, which means that you have to understand that you're chiseling something over time and you're polishing and you're finessing. And so it's a work of art when you're a dad that happens over a process of time. I think good dads realize that it's not how great you start, but it's how great you end up. And you really have to work through just having little conversations here and there. It's also about asking more questions than it is about making statements. Yeah. I think most of us, if we even just look at our Heavenly Father, even when a child does something the wrong way, asking a question is better than making a statement. Questions shape character more than just statements.
Yeah, that's helpful. Wow. I could go back and ask people to rewind because you dropped a lot of wisdom in a short bit there. Thank you. I know part of my dad life is a reflection of, or a pass down of what I experienced from my father growing up. And sometimes I've chosen a different course in certain areas. In some ways, accidentally, I do the same things that my dad did to me as a child. Can you talk just a little bit about your dad, about his kind of fatherhood of you, and then what areas have you chosen the same, and what areas have you said, no, I want to choose a different course for my family?
Yeah, I think my dad, thanks for asking, Jeff. I think My dad was a Jamaican. He is a Jamaican,
Yeah.
right? So we got a little bit of that Jamaican flow growing up in New York City, in the Bronx and everything like that. But to be honest with you, when I grew up, I was very afraid of my dad. He
Mhm.
was very rough and tough. I can't recall of any chiseling out conversations. Most of the relationship that I had with my dad was me feeling like I really had to be excellent at everything that I did and that I needed to almost be perfect in a lot of ways. So I grew up very, very afraid of my dad. He didn't teach me how to play basketball or to ride my bike or to, some of the rites of passages that you would experience with a father. And so what I did catch from him was that he had a large personality. He was very, and he's still alive. He's very, gregarious, and he loved people, and he brought in people in my home of all different types of colors and ages, and he was entrepreneurial. So he started, businesses while working, and he worked hard. So I think a lot of that now, as a 10-year church planner, 11 years of church planning, I think I caught from him the personality of connecting with people well, strong culture of hospitality, even though it was very harmful because I always felt like my like whoever he brought was more important than his family, which is some of the things that I had to struggle through in raising my children as a pastor. And so what I do want to say that's redemptive to the audience that's listening today is that I do feel like I'm experiencing reverse intimacy with my father, which I think dads have to think about as well, that sometimes when you are parenting, it's like output a whole lot, but at
Mm.
some point, we realize that we pretty much have taken some baked in DNA from our parents, and that when you get a little bit older, your parents actually want to experience something from you differently, and you can have forms of reverse intimacy. So I think that's what I'm experiencing with my dad right now.
Wow. I'd love to even hear a little bit more about that because I think a lot of us dads haven't thought about the reverse side. Can you expound on that just a little further?
Yeah. It's sort of like, while there's stages to fathering, right? Like, so, and these stages are happening concurrent to wherever you're at. How old are you?
So I'm 38.
So you're 38. You're about to get into midlife, the U curve in your life, and you'll be, segueing into being a 40-year-old man that's moving into the second half of life while raising very young children. On the same token, your dad may feel like, man, I wish I would have spent more time with Jeff or
Mhm.
man, I wish I did this, or man, and so a person like you or me has to make a decision on whether or not we'll receive reverse intimacy, which is your father trying to parent you at a totally different stage in your life
Yeah.
when you don't need a whole lot of parenting, but you still need the security of a masculine voice in your life.
Mhm.
You have to make some choices. Am I going to forgive him for not being the best dad? Or am I going to forgive him that he was really working and trying to do better for your family at a time, and he just didn't have the tools or the emotional wherewithal to provide? And so reverse intimacy is a gift that two people have to exchange and say, I'm willing to give it to you and I'm willing to receive it. So
Yep.
it's not just one directional.
Yep. Oh, that's so helpful. My dad is in heaven, but I was thinking about my father-in-law in this case, which still a lot of the similar principles apply. And yeah, I think that's something that all of us dads can pray about. What might that look like to be open to receiving, or just starting conversations about what would that even look like with a dad or a father-in-law?
Yeah.
That's really good. A question that's often helpful is learning from your mistakes. Asking we call this dad awesome, so we have to ask the not so awesome dad question.
Mhm.
Wayne, can you talk about a mistake that you made in the dad life that brought pain, but potentially to your daughters, and what you and your wife, what you guys learned from that mistake?
I think just the absence of presence was a big mistake. And so I was so busy building ministry and trying to, build a better life for the kids and keeping my wife at home, that when I was home, I was very distant still emotionally and mentally. And I think that caused a lot of pain for my kids. It definitely caused a lot of pain for me in the early portion of my 40s. I'm 45 now. but I actually had started to crave and wish that I had younger children, right? Like they're teenagers now, and then you start feeling like, oh my goodness, like I'm launching these kids into their lives now, and I regretted so much of the time. So I'm just encouraging you, bro, that 3 and 6, is that what it is?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, 136. You got it.
press in, like
Yeah,
absorb it, eat it up, all of it, because it goes really fast,
yeah.
really, really fast.
Yeah, so at the time of this conversation we're having today, we're 3 weeks ago when George Floyd was killed here in Minneapolis, and I know you've been leading your church community through this time being a sacred time to start conversations that need to be happening
Mhm,
as there's the racial tensions are in Minneapolis and around the world.
mhm.
Um, Being revealed, they're there already, but more revealed. And I've just been on a learning path of um, God, show me what I'm not seeing. Give
Yeah,
me friends and mentors who have a different perspective that can help me as a young dad. And I,
yeah,
yesterday morning, took my 6-year-old daughter and we went down on our daddy daughter date. And we just took a walk around the area in our city that's now become a memorial to George Floyd, and read and prayed and sat on the curb and said hello, met some nice people. And it was a moment of leaning into pain versus stepping away from it. And I'm
yeah,
trying to do that as a dad. And I'm doing that with our conversations on the podcast as well. And
yeah.
I would just love to ask, man, from your perspective, how are you, what wisdom, advice, suggestions for me, again, a young dad who grew up in northern Wisconsin. You grew up in New York City.
Yeah.
I grew up in northern Wisconsin, very different paths. What advice would you have for me?
Well, I want to commend you for doing what you did already, at least exposing your kids to some of the pain in the world, right? Like, I think there's one way of shielding our kids from pain, or at least being deliberate in exposing some of the pain that people are experiencing so that they can develop a heart of empathy. And I think, in particular, there's conversations that Black people like me are having with our children about the pain in the world and how to receive and react to that pain. And I think that white parents or other people of different skin hues need to have conversations about justice and what it looks like. Justice is a human issue, but in particular, America's great pain has been particularly between Black and white people. So Black kids grow up with this mentality at times where they don't see a lot of images of how they can be powerful or respected, or think about people watching Black Panther the movie, and for the first time Black kids and white kids were seeing somebody that could be a superhero that was a person of color. So I would just I think it's very important right now to give your children um, uh, uh, the capacity to see beauty and diversity, that their relationships are flourishing from a very young age with kids that are of a different color, that they're getting to see exactly what it looks like to be in a multiplicity of cultural diversity that's going to impact the type of humans they'll be 2 or 3 generations down the road. So intentional conversations. Um, and there's a lot of things I could say to that I think at least how are you diversifying the books that your kids read? There's lots of little coloring books and all that stuff that kids can start to embrace diversity at a very young age, and that's what we've done with our girls from a very young age, and thankfully it's been helpful.
Well, and I know that part of even hearing how are you dialogue in this age, so with teenagers, the dialogue that you're having in your home,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's different, it's going to be different than the dialogue that I have in my home. In fact, one of my friends reminded me that I have the choice as a white dad to have or not have with my 6-year-old the conversation today. I have the
Right,
choice
right,
versus
right.
versus not everyone has that choice because you're like based on the color of our skin. Can you tell us a little bit about what the conversation looks like in your home with your daughters?
Yeah, for us, and I think it's very different from if I had sons,
Mm,
because there's at least a lot more experiences for Black men with police brutality than, although we have the Breonna Taylor situation and some other Sandra Bland and some other instances that we can look to. I, the conversations that I've had with my kids are how to react when you feel microaggression, or when you are feeling like you are being racially profiled. um, how do you react to things that are baked into our DNA in a way that's positive, that moves the conversation forward. So we've always talked to them about presentation. We've talked to them about how you react and respond to aggression. We've talked to them about doing the best that you can. They go to predominantly white school. They've lived in predominantly white neighborhoods for a long, long time, and how to let them have their identity rooted in Christ and in their culture, that they don't have anything to be afraid of or intimidated, that they don't have to mute that, but that they need to be aware that for other people, that's a situation. Or for other people, there are going to be times where you're judged on the basis of your skin. They may think of you in a stereotypical way, and it's up to you to make sure that you debunk any type of stereotype by the way you react. So here's a line that we talk to our kids about forever, okay? The condition of the soul is always at the tip of the tongue. So I'm trying to create healthy young Black women that have a soul that is full of confidence, and they're strong, and they understand who they are. They're not muting their Blackness at all, but they're integrating with all different types of people. But because they're healthy, they know how to react to microaggressions, racism, and so on, in a way where they don't lose their dignity.
Yeah. Wow. The fact that we're talking on Zoom right now, and the beautiful, powerful analogy that you brought up in a message a couple of weeks ago about disconnect, and then the tie-in with the shutdown, and the fact that our world for 13 weeks has felt shut down. I just thought I'd maybe ask you to bring up, because I think it could help some of us dads have a little bit of a light switch moment. Can you talk about the idea of not seeing one another and the Zoom fatigue parallel to racism?
Yeah, all of us have been using Zoom since the coronavirus and everything like that. And there's this fatigue. And I'm an overseer for a church, and I was having a conversation, or trying to have a conversation, with a white guy that has a predominantly white church. And for some reason, the Zoom thing, we had some difficulties. Zoom
Yep.
just be that way. And all I could see was a big black square, right? And we're yelling at each other, dude, can you fix it? Hey man, press this. And, maybe I got to send another, notification. And we're going back and forth, and we can hear each other, but we're frantic, number one. Number two, we can't see each other. So there's no way I can feel your empathy and know what's going on, and all the facial cues that humans need to have good conversation. And eventually, after trying everything, I noticed in the bottom right corner, it said, you need to update your Zoom. And I was like, oh snap, okay. And when I updated it, it said you have to shut down and restart before the upgrade would take place. And it just, like, in that moment, the Holy Spirit just kind of laid something on my heart and said, this is exactly what it's like right now. Black and white people on two opposite sides, trying to connect, but can't see each other, can't really hear each other well, trying to fix everything on their own, trying their best to maneuver things. But really, the Spirit is just coming in and saying, you need an upgrade, because the line said that it fixes bugs that are in the program. There's a lot of good things that are happening, but we got some bugs in our churches, in our culture, in our systems, in our healthcare, in education, and we all need an upgrade. And guess what? Sometimes God has to shut some things down, restart it, so that the upgrade can take into the computer, into the database, so that we can effectively speak to each other. Here's another little thing that I didn't say in that message. Is that, have you ever seen when your Apple computer or whatever tells you that you can upgrade it tonight, or you can upgrade that, you can put in the install tomorrow? Mm-hmm. I'm one of those procrastinators where I just install it tomorrow or something. I think at this moment, God is saying, install the upgrade now. Don't put it off till tomorrow. Don't put it off till next week. We need to be doing this now.
I also am the guy who hits a remind me in an hour or remind me tomorrow on those updates. And I shared this a few episodes ago, that I just confessed to the community on DadAwesome that I, as a leader, have not said, we've got to have this conversation. I've pursued to have guests of different ages and ethnicities and said, I want to have a beautiful reflection of the kingdom as guests on the show. But my questions asked and the topics that I've headed toward, that I've directed the conversation towards, have not been justice focused and have not been, no, let's be dads who are planting seeds in our own homes to make sure those bugs are not taking root. Because I do think this is a powerful conversation with dads, because what our decisions on the home front are going to be either towards passiveness and comfort, or towards doing the shutdown, the update, right?
Yeah. Your kids will never react to what they don't see you reacting to. So that conversation, your baby girl's going to know what it feels like to sit on a stony curb and to look at injustice in her city and have her father close by her, because she'll develop an empathy that you can't expect the culture to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
They need to do that.
You know, one thing that we read a bunch and saw some beautiful murals around is George Floyd, rest in power. And there's the fist, and that was one area that I didn't necessarily know how to process that. I think you even brought up raising girls who are powerful and who are walking confidence. Can you talk a little bit about this idea of, just help me understand when they say rest in power and just the movement towards having power? How could you help me understand that?
Well, there's my pastor and I did a series called Black Fist, White Knuckles, talking about the whole idea of Black people trying to get power, and the fist being the symbol of power, and white knuckles being holding on to this paradigm that's old and so on. And the idea of resting in power is that right now we feel powerless. People of color, Black people, feel very powerless and voiceless. So the beauty of the transition, even though it's painful what we watched, the murder of George Floyd, is that now you can actually rest in the power that we didn't have here on earth. And this idea of feeling powerful. See, Black people, we're not seeking revenge. It's not like, hey, most of us aren't saying, hey, we want revenge. We want equality, which is a whole lot different. And equality is powerful. So I tell my girls, and I'll say this little plug for this weekend, I'm trying to raise pillars, not pillows. People rest their heads on pillows, but I want daughters that people will rest organizations on, will rest ideas. I want them to be pillars for a great church and a great society. And we have to make a decision that our daughters need the scaffolding of confidence so that they can walk into spaces very, very powerful, but not abusing their power, actually serving others, which lifts other people up.
Yeah. And I want that for my girls as well. I'm going to reread Psalm 144:12. May our sons flourish in their youth like well-nurtured plants, and may our daughters be like graceful pillars carved to beautify a palace.
Yeah, love that.
I love it. How can I, as a dad in my little girls, my family, how can I help? And I know it's a complicated question, but how can I help your daughters and just the amazing, diverse, like people who aren't listening? Like there's a lot of people who are white that are listening, but how can I help that be a reality? That scaffolding of pillars and strength is. You mentioned read the books that we have in our homes, conversations, like any other just practical ways that we can be a part of seeing God's kingdom come here?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things what we appreciate is when you use your voice, because we often feel like love doesn't get laryngitis. And so if you really do love people and all people, I would love for people to speak up and speak out. Well, you say, well, how do I do that? I don't want to be trite. I don't want to just post something on my social media or something like that. Well, why not? I mean, it doesn't have to be political. It could be beautiful. Like it could just be like, hey, speak up about diversity, move into this watershed moment, because for so many years, white people have been silent about justice. And we need people to speak up and speak out and say, hey, I'm with you. You don't have to always understand how to say it. And, I know that we're in cancel culture and whatnot, but when you just speak about love and loving all people, I think it does a lot. It does a lot for my girls and my kids to find out that this is not just a conversation that we're having in our home, or my kids aren't worried that, we had curfew here in New York when the riots were going down, and my daughters are texting me, Dad, it's 10 o'clock and you're not home yet. Like, can you please get home? They're worried about me driving home after 10 p.m. So when you have a voice that calls for reform or calls for unity, man, it does a whole lot for the Black community. So if you're white and you're watching or you're listening today, I want to say one of the greatest ways to be an ally, it may not be your social media, but it may be a conversation with somebody in your family that doesn't have that same perspective. Don't cancel them, love them well, but open up the space for conversation, because that just continues. And allowing your kids to actually see you doing that in a healthy way allows them not to bear any fear in engaging people when they get older.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and I commit that to you, Wayne, that I'm going to continue to use my voice.
Thank you so much, and thank you for using this platform to do that. That I'm hugely inspired by that, Jeff.
Oh yeah, for sure. I said this earlier, that when you preached a couple of years ago, the level of it was just contagious. Your joy and your love for the Lord, it's contagious. Yes, I mean, you turn it was a normal floor into a dance floor. I love so much, appreciate your joy. And I think there's something about us as dads, when our eyes are shiny, it causes our kids' eyes to shine. And this is something that I experienced from you. But I wondered if, as you kind of share maybe parting words, any encouragement or advice or coaching for us dads to actually carry ourselves with shiny eyes and help our kids, their eyes shine.
Well, I think one of the things that you constantly have to think about is you need to be the type of man that you are going to be happy walking your daughter down an aisle to, because you are the only one that's going to shape that image of who she's going to. My girls will never marry somebody that doesn't like to laugh. They'll never marry somebody that doesn't like to dance. They're never going to marry somebody that doesn't like excellence in details and small things, like, that affirms them. I've been telling them they were beautiful since they were 2 years old, and they could understand it. So I think you have to carry that weight and that respect on your shoulders all the time, and think about how you talk to your wife, right? And how that stuff, and you got to think about the culture, because daughters and sons don't grow in bad soil. So you got to be that person that's constantly thinking, am I the type of man that I would want my daughters hanging out with if there was nobody else around? Am I the type of guy that is leading a culture that I would walk my daughter down to, because I trust so much that she saw the template, the font of what it looks like to be a good, godly man? So yeah, I think that's my parting words. Have fun, laugh a lot, be bright, and have fun. Don't take yourself so seriously. Ask more questions than making statements.
Yeah. Would you say a short prayer over all of us dads listening?
Absolutely. Father, I want to thank you for every person that's listening, every dad out there right now. What a wonderful opportunity, Father, for us to stand up and model your generosity in the way that you gave your only son. I am praying right now that every dad that's watching will be so self-sacrificial for their families right now. Would you help us to be like Jesus, who pursues his bride, who loves his bride, that gave his life for his bride? And also, God, would you help us to be dads that want to have well-nurtured sons that are growing up in the stature and the maturity of Christ, and daughters that are pillars that have been carved out and adorned for a palace, not only to be decorative, but to be young ladies and young women that the structure is built upon. Would you help us right now to have the burden, God, to have the weight, to have the joy of raising children that will honor you? And I just pray right now for everyone that is listening right now, that you'll give them an extra sense of joy in doing so, and that they'll realize that they are the template and the font at which many kids will come to know what it looks like to have true biblical masculinity and manhood lived out. And I thank you for that in the name of Jesus. Amen.